This character indication and the sonatine label are unique in Beethoven's solo sonatas. Alla tedesca means in the German manner, and we can really hear this in the fast Ländler music at the very end of the first movement. The whole movement should be played with energy and good humor. Here is the first theme. The three-quarter note motto is at the beginning and at the end. Notice the chord change in measure 5 on the third beat. The second theme, very hearty. Be careful not to overplay the strong left hand, and notice the motto at the very end. The third theme, change touch and effect immediately to leggero. The right hand demonstrates its mastery of delicacy. Play right at the surface of the key, articulate, but without weight. There are 3 groups of 4 measures each. The left hand shows its mastery of technique. Build to the sforzando, then subito piano, scherzando, and very clever for the motto. The fifth theme, the right hand accepts that challenge and shows off its technique. Notice the phrase structure shifts from 2+2 to 4+4 in measure 36. The second sforzando can be slightly stronger. For the sixth theme, we are finally confirmed in the dominant D major after much delay. The motto is back for 1 measure, but then the first beat is missing. Notice that in the second ending, there is no staccato in the second measure. Beethoven begins the development in E major. And now the real fun begins. A cross-hands, very hearty dance section like a high-speed Ländler that uses sforzando in the second beat to create the effect of syncopation. The sforzando should be more rhythmic than dynamic. For the Presto tempo, we can take the third quarter note with the right hand. A sudden change to piano, then dolce. We should follow Beethoven's pedal markings here. The second theme is back, even more boisterous with the left hand in the deep bass. Beethoven adds an echo extension in piano. The dance turns somewhat violent. Has the happy Ländler turned into a contentious quarrel over country dance partners? But not for very long. Everyone is happy again. The second theme returns. Now, Beethoven elaborates the echo extension for dramatic effect. In the extension, perhaps mock anger again threatens to break up the dance. The subito piano and dolce restore the good spirits. A perfect transition brings back the motto rhythm in the left hand and takes us to the recap. The closing measures that begin with the second ending are the most fun of all. Beethoven throws the first theme from hand to hand and adds humorous grace notes that sound like guffaws, rude laughter. Score for bassoons, flute in the upper register, or maybe country fiddle. This is true Beethoven humor. In the Coda, we hear a folksy goodbye, very gentle, play leggermente dolce, possibly the first use of these terms together, no ritardando at the very end. Beethoven's Andante tempo and the espressivo in measure 1 suggest a flowing and freely expressive tempo. Let the music find its gently flowing pace and mood with the rising thirds. This movement is like a romantic character piece, music that strongly anticipates Felix Mendelssohn's Songs Without Words. The Andante 9/8 at the opening should be felt in dotted quarter notes with a subdivision in eighth notes. The espressivo suggests an intensity of tone within the prevailing piano dynamic. The left hand should be very unobtrusive, almost like a drone or vamp. The lovely simplicity of the single transition measure suggests the sonority of French horns. Beethoven modulates from G minor to E flat major, changing the key signature at the double bar. In the middle section, E flat major, we can shift to a dotted quarter note pulse without very much subdivision in eighth notes. The F sharp appoggiatura in measure 12 should be played very gently and subtly with rubato. The beautiful Cantilena is not unlike the slow movement of Beethoven's Emperor Concerto. The Cantilena becomes more florid, an anticipation of bel canto. In measure 20, the diminuendo and augmented sixth chord at the end of the measure take us to the double bar. Beethoven changes the key signature back to G minor and subtly signals the return of the first theme with the repeated D in the left hand. We can play sostenuto al tempo 1 for the third beat. The sforzando should be very expressive here. In the closing coda, we hear the opening theme once again. At the end of measure 29, Beethoven brings back the 16th note broken chords from the beginning of the middle section. Now in G minor, the song without words is in octaves for 3 measures. We should play as legato as possible. The evaded cadence, the shift to E flat major at the end of measure 32, should have a special, poignant effect. The third movement contains some of Beethoven's wittiest and engaging up-tempo music. It is also completely unique in the varied settings of the rondo first theme. Notice Beethoven's indication of dolce at the beginning. Beethoven's indication for a very easy, almost casual beginning rather than a sudden start. The music should sound very smooth and engaging, charming. In the second setting of this theme, we hear triplets in the left hand and longer phrase groups in the right hand. We can play the left hand triplets poco non legato for a more interesting texture. Notice that there is no repeat for this setting of the first theme. In the third setting, Beethoven restores the full 16-measure pattern of the first theme. We hear 16th notes in the left hand, play these non-legato, and then a really tricky new polyrhythm with a partial triplet version of the opening theme. Ingenious. The second theme of the rondo music begins boldly and assertively with the first particle of the first theme, now in unison forte with the left hand, and a new continuation. But mellows immediately, play genially and gently, but not too softly. Notice the progression from D major to G7th and the chromatic color shift from F sharp to F natural in the alto voice. In the first episode, we hear the opening rhythmic particle of the first theme without accompaniment, repeated to generate energy and launch the first episode, modulating suddenly to E minor. In this episode, Beethoven uses a rhythmic pattern from the second theme. Followed by a furious little unison scale passage. And then we hear Beethoven hammer chords. The playful transition to the rondo is based entirely on the rhythmic particle from the opening theme, Follow the unusual slurs here. In the second episode, at the double bar, Beethoven changes the key signature from G major to C major. We hear a free transformation of the unison scales from episode 1, and the hammer chords from the first episode are in the left hand. The first cycle goes from C major to F major. The second cycle reaches higher, like the first theme in the rondo, and goes from F major back to C major. Beethoven is playing a musical game. This is then repeated and elaborated. The long transition, or lead-in, goes seamlessly into the beginning of Rondo 3. Notice the key change back to G major at the double bar. We can gently bring out the voice line Beethoven has added to the left-hand triplets. Following Rondo 3, we come to the closing Coda. As an Opus 49 second movement, the most scherzando part of the piece, we hear the first two measures of the second theme, but then Beethoven surprises us. He changes the tessitura and the dynamic, setting the next two measures up in the treble instead of unisons. We hear a parody that gently makes fun of the first two measures. The pesante unisons return as before, still serious, in the low alto and bass register. And are mimicked again twice, the first time in the soprano, the second time an octave lower. The comedic effect of the high and low registers is rare in the music of the great composers and suggests a scene from the opera buffa Beethoven unfortunately never composed. Beethoven resumes the motion of the piece with a vamp and continuous 16th note motion in the left hand. Just when we thought the tricky polyrhythms were gone, Beethoven varies the vamp pattern with the partial triplets. At the end, make a big crescendo, and the movement ends with a very theatrical subito piano, a stage whisper. We can place or slightly delay each chord for better comic timing.